My Lords, misogyny has no place in our society or in our schools. The NASUWT survey is deeply concerning and underscores why delivering on the Freedom Against Violence 10-year strategy to halve violence against women and girls is a necessity and a government priority. This government is committed to tackling misogyny and the spread of toxic influences, with new misogyny resources for both teachers and parents, dedicated school programmes through the new VOG strategy, and online safety resources.
My Lords, the NASUWT Teacher Union survey indicates that misogyny is on the rise amongst our young people. 23% of female teachers have experienced misogyny in our classrooms, and this figure has increased year on year, up 6% since 2023. Teachers are pointing to the influence of the manosphere, online misogyny and AI in spreading harmful narratives, and evidence indicates that social media use in young men is driving this growth in misogynistic beliefs. What assessment has the government made of the role social media is playing in this worrying trend?
Well, I'm sure it is the case that social media has had an impact here. We know the influence that those who choose to use it to express toxic masculinity and misogyny can have. That's why we need both to support schools, as we are doing, through increased investment in resources to help teachers and students to tackle misogyny, and why the consultation that the government has launched into social media use for young people is so important, and why we've committed to act on its conclusions.
Could I just pick up on the point the Minister raised, particularly around parents? So my question is around how you intend not only to engage with parents but also the communities, particularly to deal with those negative cultural influences around perceptions around women in particular that amongst some of our young people, because it's not just in schools that this issue is actually happening. Often it's at weekends and it's in our city centres. So how are we going to engage with communities as well as parents?
Well, I think the Noble Lord makes an important point, and this is something which needs to be tackled outside school as well as inside. And that's why the DfE has worked jointly with DSIT to design, test and launch a website for parents of all age children to help them to keep their children safe online. We're currently developing misogyny-specific content for that site that will give parents information and tools to spot warning signs, to hold open conversations, and to direct to further support, which will link with the Home Office's Enough campaign, about which we will be saying more soon.
Whether they're starting with children in primary school.
Yes, the new RSHE guidance that we published and the curriculum is clear that at Key Stage 2 there's important work to be done to support children in developing their ideas and their approach to healthy relationships, which is a really important baseline for then later on in their school life to talk more explicitly about misogyny and how that's tackled.
My Lords, the reading of this report makes quite harrowing reading, but it also points to, for me, it points to two particular things. One is misogyny, and one is also a breakdown of discipline and respect for authority in school. So what work is the government doing to address this issue that covers both girls and boys? And in speaking to young boys about their behaviour, how are we going to avoid demonising boyhood?
Well, I think the Noble Lord makes two important points. On the latter point, I think it is important that we recognise that the vast majority of boys and young men abhor misogyny as much as anybody else, and supporting them to be strong allies to challenge their friends where necessary is an important part of the work. But one of the shocking elements of the NASUWT report, as the Noble Lord suggests, is the suggestion that students are using misogyny to abuse teachers. Good behaviour in all of our schools is the right of pupils and of teachers. That's why every school has a responsibility, a legal responsibility, to have a strong behaviour policy, and why we would expect there to be strong action taken to protect staff, just as we would expect that for students as well.
My Lords, unfortunately, girls are not always able to feel safe in calling out sexist or abusive behaviour that they experience from other pupils in schools. Can I ask my noble friend the Minister, what more can be done in schools and after schools to give girls the confidence to speak out and feel safe?
Well, I think my noble friend raises an important point. We want girls to be able to feel safe and to report in the way in which she suggests. But of course, it shouldn't only be the responsibility of girls to stand up for themselves in the face of misogyny. It should be part of the whole school approach to challenge that. And of course, it should also be part of the school's safeguarding process, and support for that is clearly spelt out in the Keeping Children Safe in Education guidance, statutory guidance, for staff to understand how to support girls when they report incidents, and to identify what's happening even if they don't report those incidents.
Is there any evidence that the problem is worse with the decline of single-sex schools? Would things be better if there were more single-sex schools, at least for girls?
The truth is, I don't know if there's any evidence that supports that contention. The vast majority of children in this country don't go to single-sex schools, and I think, therefore, we need to ensure that every school, single-sex or not, recognises the need to tackle misogyny and is supported, as this government will do, with the resources to be able to do that.
Lords, the Noble Baroness, the Minister, acknowledged the impact of harmful social media on our children's attitudes and behaviours. So I'm just puzzled why the government won't commit in primary legislation to restricting access for under-16s to social media. The Noble Baroness, Lady Lloyd, the Secretary of State for DCIT and the Prime Minister have all said they intend to, but the government amendment does not include that commitment. Can she explain why?
Well, can I say how much I'm enjoying getting back to this in the next stage of the Children's Wellbeing and Schools Bill on Monday, where, of course, we'll have the opportunity once again to discuss the action that this government has already taken to understand the concerns that there are about social media, but to also recognise the different views that there are about how in detail we should respond to that. That's why this government launched on the 2nd of March the consultation on how, not whether, we should take action, further measures to ensure that children have healthy relationships with technology, mobile phones and social media, and also, of course, why we tabled new powers, which mean that we can act fast on the consultation's findings within months rather than waiting years for new primary legislation every time technology evolves. I don't think it's unreasonable for a government to act on the basis of consultation and detailed consideration.
Yeah. My Lords, last week I attended the Cambridge Disinformation Summit run by the Judge Business School, where a key takeaway for me was that restricting young people's access to social media is not on its own a sufficient response to the risks we're discussing today. Does the Minister agree that we need accountability from social media companies on algorithms that promote and target extremist content to both adults and children?
Yes, I largely do agree with the Noble Lady, and of course it's important that the the strong powers within the Online Safety Act are implemented. But I think the logic of her argument is also, of course, that we need to make sure that we support children and young people and our schools to be able to challenge misogyny, to avoid falling for the toxic influencers, and to strengthen the good values and attitudes that most young people have. And that's what we'll be supporting our schools to do.